The old man looked lost. He stood in the market rain. His coat was thin, soaked through. He held nothing, just stood there. She noticed from her stall. Her name was Clover. She was 25 years old. She sold flowers every morning. Her stall was small, modest, but her heart was not. "Sir," she called out gently, "you can stand here, under my awning." She gestured to the narrow strip of dry space beside her buckets of dahlias and wrapped sunflowers. The old man looked up slowly, like he hadn't expected anyone to speak to him, like he had grown used to being invisible. "I don't want to crowd your business," he said quietly. "You won't," she said. "Business is already crowded by the rain." He smiled, small, grateful, and stepped under. His name was Harlan Voss. He was 71. He had driven 3 hours that morning from his farm in rural Tennessee to settle some paperwork at a city office, only to find the appointment had been rescheduled without notice. He had nowhere to wait and nothing to do. The rain had started before he reached his car. He had just stood there, the way tired people sometimes do when the next step stops making sense. Clover did not ask him his story. She just handed him a paper cup of coffee from her thermos, the one she always brought because the market mornings started before any cafe opened. He took it with both hands, the way people do when something warm arrives at exactly the right moment. He stayed for 2 hours. They talked, unhurriedly, the way strangers sometimes do when neither has anywhere urgent to be. She told him about the flowers, how she'd started the stall 3 years ago after her mother's flower shop closed, how she grew most of her own stock in a small rented plot outside the city, how she dreamed of having enough land one day to grow without worrying about the lease renewal every spring. He listened carefully. Not polite questions, real ones. When the rain stopped, he thanked her, set the empty cup down gently on her table, and walked away toward the parking lot. She watched him go and thought nothing more of it. He was a kind old man who needed shelter for an hour. She had a little to spare. What Clover did not know, what she had no way of knowing, was that Harlan Voss owned 400 acres of farmland outside the city. Rich soil, good water access. He had farmed it for 40 years alone after his wife passed and his children moved to other states, other lives. He had spent the last 2 years quietly deciding what to do with it. His son Merritt, 33, a logistics CEO in Atlanta, had encouraged him to sell to a development company. The offer was substantial. Harlan had the paperwork in his coat pocket the very morning he stood in the rain. He had not signed it. He drove home that afternoon thinking about a young woman who had shared her awning, her coffee, and an hour of her morning without asking for a single thing in return. He thought about what she had said, about growing without worrying about the lease. He thought about his soil, which had grown everything he'd ever asked of it for 4 decades, and which now sat waiting. 6 weeks passed. A letter arrived at Clover's stall address. She used a small P.O. box for wholesale orders. The return address was a law office in Tennessee. She opened it standing at her stall on a slow Thursday, sunflowers at her elbow. She read it twice. Then she sat down on her folding stool and read it a 3rd time. Harlan Voss had left her 40 acres of his land in a legally arranged land gift. Not a sale, not a loan, a gift. The letter explained that he had updated his estate arrangements. His reasoning, as relayed through the attorney, was written in his own words, included on a separate folded page. You gave a tired old man dry ground to stand on, and something warm to hold. You didn't know me. You didn't need to be kind. You just were. This land has been waiting for someone who understands what it means to grow something from nothing. I believe that person is you. Harlan, she called the number in the letter. The attorney confirmed everything. It was real. It was legal. It was hers. She wept quietly in her car for a long time before she drove home. What happened next surprised even Clover. when she called the number Harlan had left as a family contact, his son Merritt. The call did not go the way she feared. She had expected suspicion, resistance, a family who felt she had somehow taken something. Instead, Merritt was quiet for a long moment, and then he said, "He told me about you. The florist at the market. He talked about you more than once. He barely knew me," she said. "He knew enough," Merritt said. "He said you reminded him that kindness isn't something you do when you have extra. It's something you do when you just decide to." She did not know what to say. "He made his decision clearly," Merritt added. "I'm not contesting it. I just wanted you to know he was happy, those last weeks, settled, like something had been resolved." Harlan had passed quietly in his home 7 weeks after the market morning. He had told no one he was ill. The land gift had been arranged before he drove to the city that rainy day. The appointment he had come to keep was not paperwork for a sale, but final signatures on her gift. He had already decided. He had just wanted to meet her first. She stood on that land for the first time on a cool April morning. 40 acres, quiet, open, the soil dark and generous. She pressed her hand flat against the earth the way she had once pressed it against a cold window, reaching for something she couldn't name. Merritt came to help her map it out that same weekend. He knew the land from childhood visits, knew where the drainage ran, where the sun held longest. They walked it together without hurry. Two people connected by a man who had understood something most people forget. That a small kindness, given freely, can take root in soil you never knew existed. She named the farm Voss and Vine. The first season she planted dahlias, lavender, and sunflowers, the same kinds she had sold from a small stall in the rain. Only now they had room. Years later, when people asked her how she had gotten her start, she always told the same story. About a rainy morning, a thin coat, a paper cup of coffee, and the quiet truth she carried with her ever since. You never know the size of the seed you're planting when you choose to be kind. Kindness does not ask what it will receive. It simply opens the awning and makes room. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the whole world opens in return. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Let's spread more stories of kindness and hope together.